Glinda, the good sorceress of Oz, sat in the grand court of her palace, surrounded by her maids of honor, 100 of the most beautiful girls of the fairyland of Oz. The palace court was built of rare marbles, exquisitely polished. Fountains tinkled musically here and there. The vast colonnade, open to the south, allowed the maidens, as they raised their heads from their embroideries, to gaze upon a vista of rose-hued fields and groves of trees bearing fruits or laden with sweet-scented flowers. At times one of the girls would start a song, the others joining in the chorus, or one would rise and dance, gracefully swaying to the music of a harp played by a companion. And then Glinda smiled, glad to see her maids mixing play with work. Presently, among the fields an object was seen moving, threading the broad path that led to the castle gate. Some of the girls looked upon this object enviously. The sorceress merely gave it a glance, and nodded her stately head as if pleased, for it meant the coming of her friend and mistress, the only one in all the land that Glinda bowed to. Then, up the path trotted a wooden animal attached to a red wagon, and as the quaint steed halted at the gate, there descended from the wagon 2 young girls, Ozma, ruler of Oz, and her companion, Princess Dorothy. Both were dressed in simple white muslin gowns, and as they ran up the marble steps of the palace, they laughed and chatted as gaily as if they were not the most important persons in the world's loveliest fairyland. The maids of honor had risen, and stood with bowed heads to greet the royal Ozma, while Glinda came forward with outstretched arms to greet her guests. "We've just come on a visit, you know," said Ozma. "Both Dorothy and I were wondering how we should pass the day, when we happened to think we'd not been to your quadling country for weeks, so we took the sawhorse and rode straight here. And we came so fast," added Dorothy, "that our hair is blown all fuzzy, for the sawhorse makes a wind of his own. Usually it's a day's journey from the Emerald City, but I don't suppose we were 2 hours on the way." "You are most welcome," said Glinda the sorceress, and led them through the court to her magnificent reception hall. Ozma took the arm of her hostess, but Dorothy lagged behind, kissing some of the maids she knew best, talking with others, and making them all feel that she was their friend. When at last she joined Glinda and Ozma in the reception hall, she found them talking earnestly about the condition of the people, and how to make them more happy and contented, although they were already the happiest and most contented folks in all the world. This interested Ozma, of course, but it didn't interest Dorothy very much. So the little girl ran over to a big table on which was lying open Glinda's great book of records. This book is one of the greatest treasures in Oz, and the sorceress prizes it more highly than any of her magical possessions. That is the reason it is firmly attached to the big marble table by means of golden chains. And whenever Glinda leaves home, she locks the great book together with 5 jeweled padlocks, and carries the keys safely hidden in her bosom. I do not suppose there is any magical thing in any fairyland to compare with the record book, on the pages of which are constantly being printed a record of every event that happens in any part of the world, at exactly the moment it happens. And the records are always truthful, although sometimes they do not give as many details as one could wish. But then, lots of things happen, and so the records have to be brief, or even Glinda's great book could not hold them all. Glinda looked at the records several times each day, and Dorothy, whenever she visited the sorceress, loved to look in the book and see what was happening everywhere. Not much was recorded about the land of Oz, which is usually peaceful and uneventful, but today Dorothy found something which interested her. Indeed, the printed letters were appearing on the page, even while she looked. "This is funny," she exclaimed. "Did you know, Ozma, that there were people in your land of Oz called Skeezers?" "Yes," replied Ozma, coming to her side. "I know that on Professor Wogglebug's map of the land of Oz, there is a place marked Skeezer. But what the Skeezers are like, I do not know. No one I know has ever seen them or heard of them." The Skeezer country is way at the upper edge of the Gillikin country, with the sandy, impassable desert on one side and the mountains of Oogaboo on another side. That is a part of the land of Oz, of which I know very little. I guess no one else knows much about it either, unless it's the Skeezers themselves, remarked Dorothy. But the book says the Skeezers of Oz have declared war on the Flatheads of Oz, and there is likely to be fighting and much trouble as the result. Is that all the book says? Asked Ozma. Every word, said Dorothy, and Ozma and Glinda both looked at the record and seemed surprised and perplexed. Tell me, Glinda, said Ozma, who are the Flatheads? I cannot, Your Majesty, confessed the sorceress. Until now I never have heard of them, nor have I ever heard the Skeezers mentioned. In the faraway corners of Oz are hidden many curious tribes of people, and those who never leave their own countries and never are visited by those from our favored part of Oz, naturally are unknown to me. However, if you so desire, I can learn, through my arts of sorcery, something of the Skeezers and the Flatheads. I wish you would, answered Ozma seriously. You see, Glinda, if these are Oz people, they are my subjects, and I cannot allow any wars or troubles in the land I rule, if I can possibly help it. Very well, Your Majesty, said the sorceress. I will try to get some information to guide you. Please excuse me for a time, while I retire to my room of magic and sorcery. May I go with you? Asked Dorothy, eagerly. No, Princess, was the reply. It would spoil the charm to have anyone present. So Glinda locked herself in her own room of magic, and Dorothy and Ozma waited patiently for her to come out again. In about an hour Glinda appeared, looking grave and thoughtful. Your Majesty, she said to Ozma, the Skeezers live on a magic isle in a great lake. For that reason, because the Skeezers deal in magic, I can learn little about them. Why, I didn't know there was a lake in that part of Oz, exclaimed Ozma. The map shows a river running through the Skeezer country, but no lake. That is because the person who made the map never had visited that part of the country, explained the sorceress. The lake surely is there, and in the lake is an island, a magic isle, and on that island live the people called the Skeezers. What are they like? Inquired the ruler of Oz. My magic cannot tell me that, confessed Glinda, for the magic of the Skeezers prevents anyone outside of their domain knowing anything about them. The Flatheads must know if they're going to fight the Skeezers, suggested Dorothy. Perhaps so, Glinda replied, but I can get little information concerning the Flatheads either. They are people who inhabit a mountain just south of the Lake of the Skeezers. The mountain has steep sides and a broad, hollow top, like a basin, and in this basin the Flatheads have their dwellings. They also are magic workers, and usually keep to themselves and allow no one from outside to visit them. I have learned that the Flatheads number about 100 people, men, women, and children, while the Skeezers number just 101. What did they quarrel about, and why do they wish to fight one another? Was Ozma's next question. I cannot tell Your Majesty that, said Glinda. But see here, cried Dorothy. It's against the law for anyone but Glinda and the wizard to work magic in the land of Oz. So if these two strange people are magic makers, they are breaking the law and ought to be punished. Ozma smiled upon her little friend. Those who do not know me or my laws, she said, cannot be expected to obey my laws. If we know nothing of the Skeezers or the Flatheads, it is likely that they know nothing of us. But they ought to know, Ozma, and we ought to know. Who's going to tell them, and how are we going to make them behave? That, returned Ozma, is what I am now considering. What would you advise, Glinda? The sorceress took a little time to consider this question before she made reply. Then she said, had you not learned of the existence of the Flatheads and the Skeezers through my book of records, you would never have worried about them or their quarrels. So if you pay no attention to these peoples, you may never hear of them again. But that wouldn't be right, declared Ozma. I am ruler of all the land of Oz, which includes the Gilligan country, the Quadling country, the Winky country, and the Munchkin country, as well as the Emerald City. And being the princess of this fairyland, it is my duty to make all my people, wherever they may be happy and content, and to settle their disputes and keep them from quarreling. So, while the Skeezers and Flatheads may not know me, or that I am their lawful ruler, I now know that they inhabit my kingdom and are my subjects, so I would not be doing my duty if I kept away from them and allowed them to fight. Asterisk, that's a fact, Ozma, commented Dorothy. You've got to go up to the Gilligan country and make these people behave themselves and make up their quarrels. But how are you going to do it? That is what is puzzling me also, Your Majesty, said the sorceress. It may be dangerous for you to go into those strange countries, where the people are possibly fierce and warlike. I am not afraid, said Ozma with a smile. Asterisk. 'Tisn't a question of being afraid, argued Dorothy. Of course, we know you're a fairy, and can't be killed or hurt, and we know you've a lot of magic of your own to help you. But Ozma, dear, in spite of all this you've been in trouble before, on account of wicked enemies, and it isn't right for the ruler of all Oz to put herself in danger. Perhaps I shall be in no danger at all, returned Ozma with a little laugh. You mustn't imagine danger, Dorothy, for one should only imagine nice things, and we do not know that the Skeezers and Flatheads are wicked people, or my enemies. Perhaps they would be good and listen to reason. Dorothy is right, Your Majesty, asserted the sorceress. It is true we know nothing of these faraway subjects, except that they intend to fight one another and have a certain amount of magic power at their command. Such folks do not like to submit to interference, and they are more likely to resent your coming among them than to receive you kindly and graciously, as is your due. If you had an army to take with you, added Dorothy, it wouldn't be so bad, but there isn't such a thing as an army in all Oz. I have one soldier, said Ozma. Yes, the soldier with the green whiskers. But he's dreadful afraid of his gun and never loads it. I'm sure he'd run rather than fight. And one soldier, even if he were brave, couldn't do much against 201 Flatheads and Skeezers. What then, my friends, would you suggest? Inquired Ozma. I advise you to send the Wizard of Oz to them, and let him inform them that it is against the laws of Oz to fight, and that you command them to settle their differences and become friends, proposed Glinda. Let the wizard tell them they will be punished if they refuse to obey the commands of the princess of all the land of Oz. Ozma shook her head to indicate that the advice was not to her satisfaction. If they refuse, what then? She asked. I should be obliged to carry out my threat and punish them, and that would be an unpleasant and difficult thing to do. I am sure it would be better for me to go peacefully, without an army, and armed only with my authority as ruler, and plead with them to obey me. Then, if they prove obstinate, I could resort to other means to win their obedience. It's a ticklish thing, anyhow you look at it, sighed Dorothy. I'm sorry now that I noticed the record in the Great Book. Asterisk, but can't you realize, my dear, that I must do my duty, now that I am aware of this trouble? Asked Ozma. I am fully determined to go at once to the Magic Isle of the Skeezers and to the Enchanted Mountain of the Flatheads, and prevent war and strife between their inhabitants. The only question to decide is whether it is better for me to go alone, or to assemble a party of my friends and loyal supporters to accompany me. Asterisk, if you go, I want to go too, declared Dorothy. Whatever happens, it's going to be fun, 'cause all excitement is fun, and I wouldn't miss it for the world. Neither Ozma nor Glinda paid any attention to this statement, for they were gravely considering the serious aspect of this proposed adventure. There are plenty of friends who would like to go with you, said the sorceress, but none of Them would afford your majesty any protection in case you were in danger. You are yourself the most powerful fairy in Oz, although both I and the wizard have more varied arts of magic at our command. However, you have one art that no other in all the world can equal, the art of winning hearts and making people love to bow to your gracious presence. For that reason, I believe you can accomplish more good alone than with a large number of subjects in your train. I believe that also, agreed the princess. I shall be quite able to take care of myself, you know, but might not be able to protect others so well. I do not look for opposition, however. I shall speak to these people in kindly words and settle their dispute, whatever it may be, in a just manner. Aren't you going to take me? Pleaded Dorothy. You'll need some companion, Ozma. The princess smiled upon her little friend. I see no reason why you should not accompany me, was her reply. Two girls are not very warlike, and they will not suspect us of being on any errand, but a kindly and peaceful one. But in order to prevent war and strife between these angry peoples, we must go to them at once. Let us return immediately to the Emerald City and prepare to start on our journey early tomorrow morning. Glinda was not quite satisfied with this plan, but could not think of any better way to meet the problem. She knew that Ozma, with all her gentleness and sweet disposition, was accustomed to abide by any decision she had made and could not easily be turned from her purpose. Moreover, she could see no great danger to the fairy ruler of Oz in the undertaking, even though the unknown people she was to visit proved obstinate. But Dorothy was not a fairy. She was a little girl who had come from Kansas to live in the land of Oz. Dorothy might encounter dangers that, to Ozma, would be as nothing but to an Earth child, would be very serious. The very fact that Dorothy lived in Oz and had been made a princess by her friend Ozma prevented her from being killed or suffering any great bodily pain as long as she lived in that fairyland. She could not grow big either, and would always remain the same little girl who had come to Oz, unless in some way she left that fairyland or was spirited away from it. But Dorothy was immortal, nevertheless, and might possibly be destroyed, or hidden where none of her friends could ever find her. She could, for instance, be cut into pieces, and the pieces, while still alive and free from pain, could be widely scattered. Or she might be buried deep underground, or destroyed in other ways by evil magicians, were she not properly protected. These facts Glinda was considering while she paced with stately tread her marble hall. Finally the good sorceress paused and drew a ring from her finger. Handing it to Dorothy. Wear this ring constantly until your return, she said to the girl. If serious danger threatens you, turn the ring around on your finger, once to the right and another turn to the left. That will ring the alarm bell in my palace, and I will at once come to your rescue. But do not use the ring unless you are actually in danger of destruction. While you remain with Princess Ozma, I believe she will be able to protect you from all lesser ills. Thank you, Glinda, responded Dorothy gratefully as she placed the ring on her finger. I'm going to wear my magic belt, which I took from the Gnome King too, so I guess I'll be safe from anything the skeezers and flatheads try to do to me. Ozma had many arrangements to make before she could leave her throne and her palace in the Emerald City, even for a trip of a few days. So she bade goodbye to Glinda, and with Dorothy climbed into the red wagon. A word to the wooden sawhorse started that astonishing creature on the return journey, and so swiftly did he run that Dorothy was unable to talk or do anything but hold tight to her seat, all the way back to the Emerald City. ***. Residing in Ozma's palace at this time was a live scarecrow, a most remarkable and intelligent creature, who had once ruled the land of Oz for a brief period, and was much loved and respected by all the people. Once a Munchkin farmer had stuffed an old suit of clothes with straw, and put stuffed boots on the feet, and used a pair of stuffed cotton gloves for hands. The head of the scarecrow was a stuffed sack fastened to the body, with eyes, nose, mouth, and ears painted on the sack. When a hat had been put on the head, the thing was a good imitation of a man. The farmer placed the scarecrow on a pole in his cornfield, and it came to life in a curious manner. Dorothy, who was passing by the field, was hailed by the live scarecrow and lifted him off his pole. He then went with her to the Emerald City, where the Wizard of Oz gave him some excellent brains, and the scarecrow soon became an important personage. Ozma considered the scarecrow one of her best friends and most loyal subjects. So the morning after her visit to Glinda, she asked him to take her place as ruler of the land of Oz while she was absent on a journey, and the scarecrow at once consented without asking any questions. Ozma had warned Dorothy to keep their journey a secret, and say nothing to anyone about the Skeezers and Flatheads until their return, and Dorothy promised to obey. She longed to tell her girl friends, Tiny Trot and Betsy Bobbin, of the adventure they were undertaking, but refrained from saying a word on the subject, although both these girls lived with her in Ozma's palace. Indeed, only Glinda the sorceress knew they were going, until after they had gone, and even the sorceress didn't know what their errand might be. Princess Ozma took the sawhorse and the red wagon. Although she was not sure, there was a wagon road all the way to the Lake of the Jones. Skeezers. The land of Oz is a pretty big place, surrounded on all sides by a deadly desert which it is impossible to cross, and the Skeezer country, according to the map, was in the farthest northwestern part of Oz, bordering on the North Desert. As the Emerald City was exactly in the center of Oz, it was no small journey from there to the Skeers dot. Around the Emerald City, the country is thickly settled in every direction, but the farther away you get from the city, the fewer people there are, until those parts that border on the desert have small populations. Also, those faraway sections are little known to the Oz people, except in the south, where Glinda lives and where Dorothy has often wandered on trips of exploration. The least known of all is the Gillikin country, which harbors many strange bands of people among its mountains and valleys, and forests and streams, and Ozma was now bound for the most distant part of the Gillikin country. "I am really sorry," said Ozma to Dorothy, as they rode away in the red wagon, "not to know more about the wonderful land I rule. It is my duty to be acquainted with every tribe of people and every strange and hidden country in all Oz. But I am kept so busy at my palace, making laws and planning for the comforts of those who live near the Emerald City, that I do not often find time to make long journeys." "Well," replied Dorothy, "we'll probably find out a lot on this trip, and we'll learn all about the Skeezers and Flatheads anyhow. Time doesn't make much difference in the land of Oz, 'cause we don't grow up or get old, or become sick and die, as they do other places. So if we explore one place at a time, we'll by and by know all about every nook and corner in Oz." Dorothy wore around her waist the Gnome King's magic belt, which protected her from harm, and the magic ring which Glinda had given her was on her finger. Ozma had merely slipped a small silver wand into the bosom of her gown, for fairies do not use chemicals and herbs and the tools of wizards and sorcerers to perform their magic. The silver wand was Ozma's one weapon of offense and defense, and by its use she could accomplish many things. They had left the Emerald City just at sunrise, and the sawhorse traveled very swiftly over the roads towards the north. But in a few hours the wooden animal had to slacken his pace, because the farmhouses had become few and far between, and often there were no paths at all in the direction they wished to follow. At such times they crossed the fields, avoiding groups of trees, and fording the streams and rivulets whenever they came to them. But finally they reached a broad hillside closely covered with scrubby brush, through which the wagon could not pass. "It will be difficult even for you and me to get through without tearing our dresses," said Ozma, "so we must leave the sawhorse and the wagon here until our return." "That's all right," Dorothy replied. "I'm tired riding anyhow. Do you suppose, Ozma, we're anywhere near the Skeezer country?" "I cannot tell, Dorothy dear, but I know we've been going in the right direction, so we are sure to find it in time." The scrubby brush was almost like a grove of small trees, for it reached as high as the heads of the two girls, neither of whom was very tall. They were obliged to thread their way in and out, until Dorothy was afraid they would get lost, and finally they were halted by a curious thing that barred their further progress. It was a huge web, as if woven by gigantic spiders, and the delicate, lacy film was fastened stoutly to the branches of the bush, and continued to the right and left in the form of a half-circle. The threads of this web were of a brilliant purple color and woven into numerous artistic patterns, but it reached from the ground to branches above the heads of the girls and formed a sort of fence that hedged them in. "It doesn't look very strong, though," said Dorothy. "I wonder if we couldn't break through." She tried but found the web stronger than it seemed. All her efforts could not break a single thread. "We must go back, I think, and try to get around this peculiar web," Ozma decided. So they turned to the right and, following the web, found that it seemed to spread in a regular circle. On and on they went, until finally Ozma said they had returned to the exact spot for which they had started. "Here is a handkerchief you dropped when we were here before," she said to Dorothy. "In that case, they must have built the web behind us after we walked into the trap," exclaimed the little girl. "True," agreed Ozma. "An enemy has tried to imprison us, and they did it too," said Dorothy. "I wonder who it was." "It's a spider web, I'm quite sure," returned Ozma. "But it must be the work of enormous spiders." "Quite right," cried a voice behind them. Turning quickly around, they beheld a huge purple spider sitting not 2 yards away and regarding them with its small bright eyes. Then there crawled from the bushes a dozen more great purple spiders, which saluted the first one and said, "The web is finished, O King, and the strangers are our prisoners." Dorothy did not like the looks of these spiders at all. They had big heads, sharp claws, small eyes, and fuzzy hair all over their purple bodies. "They look wicked," she whispered to Ozma. "What shall we do?" Ozma gazed upon the spiders with a serious face. "What is your object in making us prisoners?" she inquired. "We need someone to keep house for us," answered the Spider King. "There is sweeping and dusting to be done, and polishing and washing of dishes, and that is work my people dislike to do. So we decided that if any strangers came our way, we would capture them and make them our servants." "I am Princess Ozma, ruler of all Oz," said the girl with dignity. "Well, I am king of all spiders," was the reply, "and that makes me your master. Come with me to my palace, and I will instruct you in your work." "Asterisk, I won't," said Dorothy indignantly. "We won't have anything to do with you." "We'll see about that," returned the spider in a severe tone, and the next instant he made a dive straight at Dorothy, opening the claws in his legs as if to grab and pinch her with the sharp points. But the girl was wearing her magic belt and was not harmed. The Spider King could not even touch her. He turned swiftly and made a dash at Ozma, but she held her magic wand over his head, and the monster recoiled as if it had been struck. "You'd better let us go," Dorothy advised him, "for you see you can't hurt us." "So I see," returned the Spider King angrily. "Your magic is greater than mine, but I'll not help you to escape. If you can break the magic web my people have woven, you may go. If not, you must stay here and starve." With that, the Spider King uttered a peculiar whistle, and all the spiders disappeared. "There is more magic in my fairyland than I dreamed of," remarked the beautiful Ozma, with a sigh of regret. "It seems that my laws have not been obeyed, for even these monstrous spiders defy me by means of magic." "Never mind that now," said Dorothy. "Let's see what we can do to get out of this trap." They now examined the web with great care and were amazed at its strength. Although finer than the finest silken hairs, it resisted all their efforts to work through, even though both girls threw all their weight against it. We must find some instrument which will cut the threads of the web, said Ozma, finally. Let us look about for such a tool. So they wandered among the bushes, and finally came to a shallow pool of water, formed by a small bubbling spring. Dorothy stooped to get a drink, and discovered in the water a green crab, about as big as her hand. The crab had two big, sharp claws, and as soon as Dorothy saw them, she had an idea that those claws could save them. Come out of the water, she called to the crab. I want to talk to you. Rather lazily, the crab rose to the surface and caught hold of a bit of rock. With his head above the water, he said in a cross voice, What do you want? We want you to cut the web of the purple spiders with your claws, so we can get through it, answered Dorothy. You can do that, can't you? I suppose so, replied the crab. But if I do, what will you give me? What do you wish? Ozma inquired. I wish to be white, instead of green, said the crab. Green crabs are very common, and white ones are rare. Besides, the purple spiders, which infest this hillside, are afraid of white crabs. Could you make me white if I should agree to cut the web for you? Yes, said Ozma. I can do that easily. And so you may know I am speaking the truth. I will change your color now. She waved her silver wand over the pool, and the crab instantly became snow white all except his eyes, which remained black. The creature saw his reflection in the water, and was so delighted that he at once climbed out of the pool and began moving slowly toward the web by backing away from the pool. He moved so very slowly that Dorothy cried out impatiently, Dear me, this will never do. Catching the crab in her hands, she ran with him to the web. She had to hold him up even then, so he could reach with his claws strand after strand of the filmy purple web, which he was able to sever with one nip-dot asterisk when enough of the web had been cut to allow them to pass. Dorothy ran back to the pool and placed the white crab in the water, after which she rejoined Ozma. They were just in time to escape through the web, for several of the purple spiders now appeared, having discovered that their web had been cut, and had the girls not rushed through the opening, the spiders would have quickly repaired the cuts, and again imprisoned them. Ozma and Dorothy ran as fast as they could, and although the angry spiders threw a number of strands of web after them, hoping to lasso them or entangle them in the coils, they managed to escape and clamber to the top of the hill. From the top of the hill, Ozma and Dorothy looked down into the valley beyond, and were surprised to find it filled with a floating mist that was as dense as smoke. Nothing in the valley was visible, except these rolling waves of mist, but beyond, on the other side, rose a grassy hill that appeared quite beautiful. Well, said Dorothy, what are we to do, Ozma? Walk down into that thick fog, and probably get lost in it, or wait till it clears away. I'm not sure it will clear away, however long we wait, replied Ozma doubtfully. If we wish to get on, I think we must venture into the mist. But we can't see where we're going, or what we're stepping on, protested Dorothy. There may be dreadful things mixed up in that fog, and I'm scared just to think of wading into it. Even Ozma seemed to hesitate. She was silent and thoughtful for a little while, looking at the rolling drifts that were so gray and forbidding. Finally she said, I believe this is a mist valley, where these moist clouds always remain, for even the sunshine above does not drive them away. Therefore the mist maids must live here, and they are fairies and should answer my call. She placed her two hands before her mouth, forming a hollow with them, and uttered a clear, thrilling, bird-like cry. It floated far out over the mist waves, and presently was answered by a similar sound, as of a far-off echo. Dorothy was much impressed. She had seen many strange things since coming to this fairy country, but here was a new experience. At ordinary times Ozma was just like any little girl one might chance to meet, simple, merry, lovable as could be, yet with a certain reserve that lent her dignity in her most joyous moods. There were times, however, when seated on her throne and commanding her subjects, or when her fairy powers were called into use, when Dorothy and all others about her stood in awe of their lovely girl ruler and realized her superiority, Ozma waited. Presently out from the billows rose beautiful forms, clothed in fleecy, trailing garments of gray that could scarcely be distinguished from the mist. Their hair was mist color too. Only their gleaming arms and sweet, pallid faces proved they were living, intelligent creatures answering the call of a sister fairy. Like sea nymphs, they rested on the bosom of the clouds. Their eyes turned questioningly upon the two girls who stood upon the bank. One came quite near, and to her Ozma said, "Will you please take us to the opposite hillside? We are afraid to venture into the mist. I am Princess Ozma of Oz, and this is my friend Dorothy, a Princess of Oz." The mist maids came nearer, holding out their arms. Without hesitation, Ozma advanced and allowed them to embrace her, and Dorothy plucked up courage to follow. Very gently, the mist maids held them. Dorothy thought the arms were cold and misty. They didn't seem real at all. Yet they supported the two girls above the surface of the billows and floated with them so swiftly to the green hillside opposite that the girls were astonished to find themselves set upon the grass before they realized they had fairly started. "Thank you," said Ozma gratefully, and Dorothy also added her thanks for the service. The mist maids made no answer, but they smiled and waved their hands in goodbye as again they floated out into the mist and disappeared from view. "Well," said Dorothy, with a laugh, "that was easier than I expected. It's worthwhile, sometimes, to be a real fairy. But I wouldn't like to be that kind and live in a dreadful fog all the time." They now climbed the bank and found before them a delightful plain that spread for miles in all directions. Fragrant wild flowers were scattered throughout the grass. There were bushes bearing lovely blossoms and luscious fruits. Now and then, a group of stately trees added to the beauty of the landscape. But there were no dwellings or signs of life. The farther side of the plain was bordered by a row of palms, and just in front of the palms rose a queerly shaped hill that towered above the plain like a mountain. The sides of this hill were straight, up and down. It was oblong in shape, and the top seemed flat and level. "Oh ho!" cried Dorothy. "I'll bet that's the mountain Glinda told us of, where the Flatheads live." "If it is," replied Ozma, "the Lake of the Skeezers must be just beyond the line of palm trees." "Can you walk that far, Dorothy?" "Of course, in time," was the prompt answer. "I'm sorry we had to leave the sawhorse and the red wagon behind us, for they'd come in handy just now. But with the end of our journey in sight, a tramp across these pretty green fields won't tire us a bit." It was a longer tramp than they suspected, however, and night overtook them before they could reach the flat mountain. So Ozma proposed they camp for the night, and Dorothy was quite ready to approve. She didn't like to admit to her friend she was tired, but she told herself that her legs had prickers in them, meaning they had begun to ache, usually when Dorothy started on a journey of exploration or adventure. She carried with her a basket of food and other things that a traveler in a strange country might require. But to go away with Ozma was quite a different thing, as experience had taught her. The fairy ruler of Oz only needed her silver wand tipped at one end with a great, sparkling emerald to provide through its magic all that they might need. Therefore Ozma, having halted with her companion and selected a smooth, grassy spot on the plain, waved her wand in graceful curves and chanted some mystic words in her sweet voice, and in an instant a handsome tent appeared before them. The canvas was striped purple and white, and from the center pole fluttered the royal banner of Oz. "Come, dear," said Ozma, taking Dorothy's hand. I am hungry, and I'm sure you must be also. So let us go in and have our feast. On entering the tent, they found a table set for two, with snowy linen, bright silver, and sparkling glassware. A vase of roses in the center, and many dishes of delicious food, some smoking hot, waiting to satisfy their hunger. Also, on either side of the tent were beds, with satin sheets, warm blankets and pillows filled with swan's down. There were chairs, too, and tall lamps that lighted the interior of the tent with a soft, rosy glow. Dorothy, resting herself at her fairy friend's command, and eating her dinner with unusual enjoyment, thought of the wonders of magic. If one were a fairy and knew the secret laws of nature and the mystic words and ceremonies that commanded those laws, then a simple wave of a silver wand would produce instantly all that men work hard and anxiously for through weary years. And Dorothy wished in her kindly, innocent heart that all men and women could be fairies with silver wands and satisfy all their needs without so much work and worry. For then, she imagined, they would have all their working hours to be happy in. But Ozma, looking into her friend's face and reading those thoughts, gave a laugh and said, No, Dorothy, that wouldn't do at all. Instead of happiness, your plan would bring weariness to the world. If everyone could wave a wand and have his wants fulfilled, there would be little to wish for. There would be no eager striving to obtain the difficult, for nothing would then be difficult, and the pleasure of earning something longed for, and only to be secured by hard work and careful thought, would be utterly lost. There would be nothing to do, you see, and no interest in life and in our fellow creatures. That is all that makes life worth our while, to do good deeds and to help those less fortunate than ourselves. Well, you're a fairy, Ozma. Aren't you happy? Asked Dorothy. Yes, dear, because I can use my fairy powers to make others happy. Had I no kingdom to rule and no subjects to look after, I would be miserable. Also, you must realize that while I am a more powerful fairy than any other inhabitant of Oz, I am not as powerful as Glinda the sorceress, who has studied many arts of magic that I know nothing of. Asterisk. Even the little Wizard of Oz can do some things I am unable to accomplish, while I can accomplish things unknown to the wizard. This is to explain that I am not all-powerful by any means. My magic is simply fairy magic, and not sorcery or wizardry. All the same, said Dorothy, I'm mighty glad you could make this tent appear, with our dinners and beds all ready for us. Ozma smiled. Yes, it is indeed wonderful, she agreed. Not all fairies know that sort of magic, but some fairies can do magic that fills me with astonishment. I think that is what makes us modest and unassuming, the fact that our magic arts are divided, some being given each of us. I'm glad I don't know everything, Dorothy, and that there still are things in both nature and in wit for me to marvel at. Dorothy couldn't quite understand this, so she said nothing more on the subject, and presently had a new reason to marvel. For when they had quite finished their meal table, and contents disappeared in a flash, No dishes to wash, Ozma, she said with a laugh. I guess you'd make a lot of folks happy if you could teach 'em just that one trick. Asterisk. For an hour Ozma told stories and talked with Dorothy about various people in whom they were interested. And then it was bedtime, and they undressed and crept into their soft beds and fell asleep almost as soon as their heads touched their pillows. Asterisk. The flat mountain looked much nearer in the clear light of the morning sun. But Dorothy and Ozma knew there was a long tramp before them, even yet. They finished dressing only to find a warm, delicious breakfast awaiting them, and having eaten, they left the tent and started toward the mountain, which was their first goal. After going a little way, Dorothy looked back and found that the fairy tent had entirely disappeared. She was not surprised, for she knew this would happen. Can't your magic give us a horse and wagon or an automobile? Inquired Dorothy. No, dear. I'm sorry that such magic is beyond my power, confessed her fairy friend. Perhaps Glinda could, said Dorothy thoughtfully. Glinda has a stork chariot that carries her through the air, said Ozma. But even our great sorceress cannot conjure up other modes of travel. Don't forget what I told you last night, that no one is powerful enough to do everything. Well, I suppose I ought to know that, having lived so long in the land of Oz, replied Dorothy. But I can't do any magic at all, and so I can't figure out exactly how you and Glinda and the wizard do it. Don't try, laughed Ozma. But you have at least one magical art, Dorothy. You know the trick of winning all hearts. No, I don't, said Dorothy earnestly. If I really can do it, Ozma, I am sure I don't know how I do it. It took them a good 2 hours to reach the foot of the round, flat mountain, and then they found the sides so steep that they were like the wall of a house. Even my purple kitten couldn't climb them, remarked Dorothy, gazing upward. But there is some way for the Flatheads to get down and up again, declared Ozma. Otherwise they couldn't make war with the Skeezers, or even meet them and quarrel with them. That's so, Ozma. Let's walk around a ways. Perhaps we'll find a ladder or something. They walked quite a distance, for it was a big mountain, and as they circled around it and came to the side that faced the palm trees, they suddenly discovered an entranceway cut out of the rock wall. This entrance was arched overhead, and not very deep, because it merely led to a short flight of stone stairs. Oh, we found a way to the top at last, announced Ozma, and the two girls turned and walked straight toward the entrance. Suddenly, they bumped against something and stood still, unable to proceed farther. Dear me, exclaimed Dorothy, rubbing her nose, which had struck something hard, although she could not see what it was. This isn't as easy as it looks. What has stopped us, Ozma? Is it magic of some sort? Ozma was feeling around, her hands outstretched before her. Yes, dear, it is magic, she replied. The Flatheads had to have a way from their mountain top from the plain below, but to prevent enemies from rushing up the stairs to conquer them, they have built, at a small distance before the entrance, a wall of solid stone, the stones being held in place by cement, and then they made the wall invisible. I wonder why they did that, mused Dorothy. A wall would keep folks out anyhow, whether it could be seen or not, so there wasn't any use making it invisible. Seems to me it would have been better to have left it solid, for then no one would have seen the entrance behind it. Now anybody can see the entrance, as we did, and probably anybody that tries to go up the stairs gets bumped, as we did. Ozma made no reply at once. Her face was grave and thoughtful. I think I know the reason for making the wall invisible, she said after a while. The Flatheads used the stairs for coming down and going up. If there was a solid stone wall to keep them from reaching the plain, they would themselves be imprisoned by the wall. So they had to leave some place to get around the wall. And if the wall was visible, all strangers or enemies would find the place to go around it, and then the wall would be useless. So the Flatheads cunningly made their wall invisible, believing that everyone who saw the entrance to the mountain would walk straight toward it, as we did, and find it impossible to go any farther. I suppose the wall is really high and thick, and can't be broken through, so those who find it in their way are obliged to go away again. Well, said Dorothy, if there's a way around the wall, where is it? We must find it, returned Ozma, and began feeling her way along the wall. Dorothy followed and began to get discouraged when Ozma had walked nearly a quarter of a mile away from the entrance. But now the invisible wall curved in toward the side of the mountain and suddenly ended, leaving just space enough between the wall and the mountain for an ordinary person to pass through. The girls went in, single file, and Ozma explained that they were now behind the barrier and could go back to the entrance. They met no further obstructions. Most people, Ozma, wouldn't have figured this thing out the way you did, remarked Dorothy. If I'd been alone, the invisible wall surely would have stumped me. Reaching the entrance, they began to mount the stone stairs. They went up 10 stairs, and then down 5 stairs, following a passage cut from the rock. The stairs were just wide enough for the 2 girls to walk abreast, arm in arm. At the bottom of the 5 stairs, the passage turned to the right, and they ascended 10 more stairs, only to find at the top of the flight 5 stairs leading straight down again. Again, the passage turned abruptly, this time to the left, and 10 more stairs led upward. The passage was now quite dark, for they were in the heart of the mountain, and all daylight had been shut out by the turns of the passage. However, Ozma drew her silver wand from her bosom, and the great jewel at its end gave out a lustrous, green-tinted light which lighted the place well enough for them to see their way plainly. 10 steps up, 5 steps down, and a turn this way or that. That was the program, and Dorothy figured that they were only gaining 5 stairs upward each trip that they made. Those flatheads must be funny people, she said to Ozma. They don't seem to do anything in a bold, straightforward manner. In making this passage, they forced everyone to walk 3 times as far as is necessary. And of course, this trip is just as tiresome to the flatheads as it is to other folks. That is true, answered Ozma. Yet it is a clever arrangement to prevent their being surprised by intruders. Every time we reach the 10th step of a flight, the pressure of our feet on the stone makes a bell ring on top of the mountain to warn the flatheads of our coming. How do you know that? Demanded Dorothy, astonished. I've heard the bell ever since we started, Ozma told her. You could not hear it, I know, but when I am holding my wand in my hand, I can hear sounds a great distance off. Do you hear anything on top of the mountain except the bell? Inquired Dorothy. Yes, the people are calling to one another in alarm, and many footsteps are approaching the place where we will reach the flat top of the mountain. This made Dorothy feel somewhat anxious. I'd thought we were going to visit just common, ordinary people, she remarked, but they're pretty clever, it seems, and they know some kinds of magic too. They may be dangerous, Ozma. Perhaps we'd better stay at home. Finally, the upstairs and downstairs passage seemed coming to an end, for daylight again appeared ahead of the 2 girls, and Ozma replaced her wand in the bosom of her gown. The last 10 steps brought them to the surface, where they found themselves surrounded by such a throng of queer people that for a time they halted, speechless, and stared into the faces that confronted them. Dorothy knew at once why these mountain people were called flatheads. Their heads were really flat on top, as if they had been cut off just above the eyes and ears. Also, the heads were bald, with no hair on top at all, and the ears were big and stuck straight out, and the noses were small and stubby, while the mouths of the flatheads were well-shaped and not unusual. Their eyes were perhaps their best feature, being large and bright and a deep violet in color. The costumes of the flatheads were all made of metals dug from their mountain. Small gold, silver, tin, and iron discs, about the size of pennies and very thin, were cleverly wired together and made to form knee trousers and jackets for the men, and skirts and waists for the women. The colored metals were skillfully mixed to form stripes and checks of various sorts, so that the costumes were quite gorgeous, and reminded Dorothy of pictures she had seen of knights of old clothed in armor. Aside from their flat heads, these people were not really bad looking. The men were armed with bows and arrows, and had small axes of steel stuck in their metal belts. They wore no hats nor ornaments. Asterisk, when they saw that the intruders on their mountain were only 2 little girls. The flatheads grunted with satisfaction and drew back, permitting them to see what the mountain top looked like. It was shaped like a saucer, so that the houses and other buildings, all made of rocks, could not be seen over the edge by anyone standing in the plain below. But now a big fat flathead stood before the girls, and in a gruff voice demanded, "What are you doing here? Have the skeezers sent you to spy upon us? I am Princess Ozma, ruler of all the land of Oz. Well, I've never heard of the land of Oz, so you may be what you claim, returned the Flathead. This is the land of Oz. Oz part of it, anyway, exclaimed Dorothy. So Princess Ozma rules you Flathead people, as well as all the other people in Oz. The man laughed, and all the others who stood around laughed, too. Someone in the crowd called, "She'd better not tell the Supreme Dictator about ruling." The Flatheads. Eh, friends? No, indeed. They all answered in positive tones. "Who is your Supreme Dictator?" answered Ozma. "I think I'll let him tell you that himself," answered the man who had first spoken. "You have broken our laws by coming here, and whoever you are, the Supreme Dictator must fix your punishment. Come along with me." He started down a path, and Ozma and Dorothy followed him without protest, as they wanted to see the most important person in this queer country. The houses they passed seemed pleasant enough, and each had a little yard in which were flowers and vegetables. Walls of rock separated the dwellings, and all the paths were paved with smooth slabs of rock. This seemed their only building material, and they utilized it cleverly for every purpose. Asterisk, directly in the center of the great saucer stood a larger building which the Flathead informed the girls was the palace of the Supreme Dictator. He led them through an entrance hall into a big reception room, where they sat upon stone benches and awaited the coming of the dictator. Pretty soon he entered from another room, a rather lean and rather old Flathead, dressed much like the others. Of this strange race, and only distinguished from them by the sly and cunning expression of his face. He kept his eyes half closed and looked through the slits of them at Ozma and Dorothy, who rose to receive him. "Are you the Supreme Dictator of the Flatheads?" inquired Ozma. "Yes, that's me," he said, rubbing his hands slowly together. "My word is law. I'm the head of the Flatheads on this flat headland. I am Princess Ozma of Oz, and I have come from the Emerald City to—" "Stop a minute," interrupted the dictator, and turned to the man who had brought the girls there. "Go away, Dictator fellow Flathead," he commanded. "Return to your duty and guard the stairway. I will look after these strangers." The man bowed and departed, and Dorothy asked wonderingly, "Is he a dictator too?" "Of course," was the answer. "Everybody here is a dictator of something or other. They're all office holders. That's what keeps them contented. But I'm the Supreme Dictator of all, and I'm elected once a year. This is a democracy, you know, where the people are allowed to vote for their rulers. A good many others would like to be Supreme Dictator, but as I made a law that I am always to count the votes myself, I am always elected. What is your name?" asked Ozma. "I am called the Sudik, which is short for Supreme Dictator. I sent that man away because the moment you mentioned Ozma of Oz and the Emerald City, I knew who you are. I suppose I'm the only Flathead that ever heard of you, but that's because I have more brains than the rest." Dorothy was staring hard at the Sudik. "I don't see how you can have any brains at all," she remarked, "because the part of your head is gone where brains are kept." "I don't blame you for thinking that," he said. "Once the Flatheads had no brains because, as you say, there is no upper part to their heads to hold brains. But long, long ago, a band of fairies flew over this country and made it all a fairyland, and when they came to the Flatheads, the fairies were sorry to find them all very stupid and quite unable to think. So, as there was no good place in their bodies in which to put Brains the Fairy Queen gave each one of us a nice can of brains to carry in his pocket, and that made us just as intelligent as other people. See," he continued, "here is one of the cans of brains the fairies gave us." He took from a pocket a bright tin can having a pretty red label on it which said, "Flathead Concentrated Brains, Extra Quality." Asterisk, "And does every Flathead have the same kind of brains?" asked Dorothy. "Yes, they're all alike. Here's another can." From another pocket he produced a second can of brains, Did the fairies give you a double supply? Inquired Dorothy. No. But one of the flatheads thought he wanted to be the Sudik and tried to get my people to rebel against me. So I punished him by taking away his brains. One day my wife scolded me severely, so I took away her can of brains. She didn't like that and went out and robbed several women of their brains. Then I made a law that if anyone stole another's brains, or even tried to borrow them, he would forfeit his own brains to the Sudik. So each one is content with his own canned brains, and my wife and I are the only ones on the mountain with more than one can. I have 3 cans, and that makes me very clever, so clever that I'm a good sorcerer, if I do say it myself. My poor wife had 4 cans of brains and became a remarkable witch, but alas, that was before those terrible enemies, the Skeezers, transformed her into a golden pig. Good gracious, cried Dorothy. Is your wife really a golden pig? She is. The Skeezers did it, and so I have declared war on them. In revenge for making my wife a pig, I intend to ruin their magic island and make the Skeezers the slaves of the Flatheads. The Sudik was very angry now. His eyes flashed and his face took on a wicked and fierce expression. But Ozma said to him, very sweetly and in a friendly voice, I am sorry to hear this. Will you please tell me more about your troubles with the Skeezers? Then perhaps I can help you. She was only a girl, but there was dignity in her pose and speech which impressed the Sudik. If you are really Princess Ozma of Oz, the Flathead said, you are one of that band of fairies who under Queen Lurline made all Oz a fairyland. I have heard that Lurline left one of her own fairies to rule Oz and gave the fairy the name of Ozma. If you knew this, why did you not come to me at the Emerald City and tender me your loyalty and obedience? Asked the ruler of Oz. Well, I only learned the fact lately, and I've been too busy to leave home, he explained, looking at the floor instead of into Ozma's eyes. She knew he had spoken a falsehood, but only said, why did you quarrel? With the Skeezers? It was this way, began the Sudik, glad to change the subject. We Flatheads love fish, and as we have no fish on this mountain, we would sometimes go to the lake of the Skeezers to catch fish. This made the Skeezers angry, for they declared the fish in their lake belonged to them, and were under their protection, and they forbade us to catch them. That was very mean and unfriendly in the Skeezers, you must admit, and when we paid no attention to their orders, they set a guard on the shore of the lake to prevent our fishing. Now, my wife, Rora Flathead, having 4 cans of brains, had become a wonderful witch, and fish being brain food, she loved to eat fish better than any one of us. So she vowed she would destroy every fish in the lake, unless the Skeezers let us catch what we wanted. They defied us, so Rora prepared a kettle full of magic poison, and went down to the lake one night to dump it all in the water and poison the fish. It was a clever idea, quite worthy of my dear wife, but the Skeezer Queen, a young lady named Ku-E-O- hid on the bank of the lake, and taking Rora unawares, transformed her into a golden pig. The poison was spilled on the ground, and wicked Queen Ku-E-O, not content with her cruel transformation, even took away my wife's 4 cans of brains, so she is now a common grunting pig without even brains enough to know her own name. Then, said Ozma thoughtfully, the Queen of the Skeezers must be a sorceress. Yes, said the Sudik, but she doesn't know much magic after all. She is not as powerful as Rora Flathead was, nor half as powerful as I am now, as Queen Ku-E-O will discover when we fight our great battle and destroy her. The golden pig can't be a witch anymore, of course, observed Dorothy. No. Even had Queen Ku-E-O left her the 4 cans of brains, poor Rora in a pig's shape couldn't do any witchcraft. A witch has to use her fingers, and a pig has only cloven hoofs. It seems a sad story, was Ozma's comment, and All the trouble arose because the Flatheads wanted fish that did not belong to them. As for that, said the Sudik, again angry, I made a law that any of my people could catch fish in the Lake of the Skeezers whenever they wanted to. So the trouble was through the Skeezers defying my law. You can only make laws to govern your own people, asserted Ozma sternly. I alone am empowered to make laws that must be obeyed by all the peoples of Oz. Pooh, cried the Sudik scornfully. You can't make me obey your laws, I assure you. I know the extent of your powers, Princess Ozma of Oz, and I know that I am more powerful than you are. To prove it, I shall keep you and your companion prisoners in this mountain until after we have fought and conquered the Skeezers. Then, if you promise to be good, I may let you go home again. Dorothy was amazed by this effrontery and defiance of the beautiful girl ruler of Oz, whom all until now had obeyed without question. But Ozma, still unruffled and dignified, looked at the Sudik and said, You did not mean that. You are angry, and speak unwisely without reflection. I came here from my palace in the Emerald City to prevent war and to make peace between you and the Skeezers. I do not approve of Queen Coo-ee-oh's action in transforming your wife Rora into a pig, nor do I approve of Rora's cruel attempt to poison the fishes in the lake. No one has the right to work magic in my dominions without my consent, so the Flatheads and the Skeezers have both broken my laws, which must be obeyed. If you want to make peace, said the Sudik, make the Skeezers restore my wife to her proper form and give back her 4 cans of brains. Also make them agree to allow us to catch fish in their lake. No, returned Ozma, I will not do that, for it would be unjust. I will have the golden pig again transformed into your wife Rora, and give her 1 can of brains, but the other 3 cans must be restored to those she robbed. Neither may you catch fish in the Lake of the Skeezers, for it is their lake, and the fish belong to them. This arrangement is just and honorable, and you must agree to it. Never, cried the Sudik. Just then a pig came running into the room, uttering dismal grunts. It was made of solid gold, with joints at the bends of the legs and in the neck and jaws. The golden pig's eyes were rubies, and its teeth were polished ivory. There, said the Sudik, gaze on the evil work of Queen Coo-ee-oh, and then say if you can prevent my making war on the Skeezers. That grunting beast was once my wife, the most beautiful flathead on our mountain, and a skillful witch. Now look at her. Fight the Skeezers, fight the Skeezers, fight the Skeezers, grunted the golden pig. I will fight the Skeezers, exclaimed the Flathead chief, and if a dozen Ozmas of Oz forbade me, I would fight just the same. Not if I can prevent it, asserted Ozma. You can't prevent it. But since you threaten me, I'll have you confined in the bronze prison until the war is over, said the Sudik. He whistled, and 4 stout Flatheads, armed with axes and spears, entered the room and saluted him. Turning to the men, he said, Take these 2 girls, bind them with wire ropes, and cast them into the bronze prison. The 4 men bowed low, and one of them asked, Where are the 2 girls, most noble Sudik? The Sudik turned to where Ozma and Dorothy had stood, but they had vanished. Ozma, seeing it was useless to argue with the supreme dictator of the Flatheads, had been considering how best to escape from his power. She realized that his sorcery might be difficult to overcome, and when he threatened to cast Dorothy and her into a bronze prison, she slipped her hand into her bosom and grasped her silver wand. With the other hand, she grasped the hand of Dorothy. But these motions were so natural that the Sudik did not notice them. Then when he turned to meet his 4 soldiers, Ozma instantly rendered both herself and Dorothy invisible and swiftly led her companion around the group of Flatheads and out of the room. As they reached the entry and descended the stone steps, Ozma whispered, Let us run, dear. We are invisible, so no one will see us. Dorothy understood, and she was a good runner. Ozma had marked the place where the grand stairway that led to the plane was located, so they made directly for it. Some people were in the paths, but these they dodged around. One or two flatheads heard the pattering of footsteps of the girls on the stone pavement and stopped with bewildered looks to gaze around them. But no one interfered with the invisible fugitives. The Sudik had lost no time in starting the chase. He and his men ran so fast that they might have overtaken the girls before they reached the stairway had not the golden pig suddenly run across their path. The Sudik tripped over the pig and fell flat, and his 4 men tripped over him and tumbled in a heap. Before they could scramble up and reach the mouth of the passage, it was too late to stop the 2 girls. There was a guard on each side of the stairway, but of course they did not see Ozma and Dorothy as they sped past and descended the steps. Then they had to go up 5 steps and down another 10, and so on, in the same manner in which they had climbed to the top of the mountain. Ozma lighted their way with her wand, and they kept on without relaxing their speed until they reached the bottom. Then they ran to the right and turned the corner of the invisible wall, just as the Sudik and his followers rushed out of the arched entrance and looked around in an attempt to discover the fugitives. Ozma now knew they were safe, so she told Dorothy to stop, and both of them sat down on the grass until they could breathe freely and become rested from their mad flight. As for the Sudik, he realized he was foiled and soon turned and climbed his stairs again. He was very angry with Ozma and angry with himself, because now that he took time to think, he remembered that he knew very well the art of making people invisible and visible again, and if he had only thought of it in time, he could have used his magic knowledge to make the girls visible and so have captured them easily. However, it was now too late for regrets, and he determined to make preparations at once to march all his forces against the Skeezers. "What shall we do next?" asked Dorothy when they were rested. "Let us find the Lake of the Skeezers," replied Ozma. "From what that dreadful Sudik said, I imagine the Skeezers are good people and worthy of our friendship. And if we go to them, we may help them to defeat the Flatheads." "I suppose we can't stop the war now," remarked Dorothy reflectively, as they walked toward the row of palm trees. "No. The Sudik is determined to fight the Skeezers, so all we can do is to warn them of their danger and help them as much as possible." "Of course you'll punish the Flatheads," said Dorothy. "Well, I do not think the Flathead people are as much to blame as their supreme dictator," was the answer. "If he is removed from power and his unlawful magic taken from him, the people will probably be good and respect the laws of the land of Oz, and live at peace with all their neighbors in the future." "I hope so," said Dorothy with a sigh of doubt. The palms were not far from the mountain, and the girls reached them after a brisk walk. The huge trees were set close together, in 3 rows, and had been planted so as to keep people from passing them. But the Flatheads had cut a passage through this barrier, and Ozma found the path and led Dorothy to the other side. Beyond the palms, they discovered a very beautiful scene. Bordered by a green lawn was a great lake fully a mile from shore to shore, the waters of which were exquisitely blue and sparkling, with little wavelets breaking its smooth surface where the breezes touched it. In the center of this lake appeared a lovely island, not of great extent, but almost entirely covered by a huge round building with glass walls and a high glass dome, which glittered brilliantly in the sunshine. Between the glass building and the edge of the island was no grass, flowers, or shrubbery, but only an expanse of highly polished white marble. There were no boats on either shore, and no signs of life could be seen anywhere on the island. "Well," said Dorothy, gazing wistfully at the island, "we found the Lake of the Skeezers and their magic isle. I guess the Skeezers are in that big glass palace, but we can't get at 'em." Princess Ozma considered the situation gravely. Then she tied her handkerchief to her wand and standing at the water's edge, waved the handkerchief like a flag as a signal. For a time they could observe no response. "I don't see what good that will do," said Dorothy. "Even if the Skeezers are on that island and see us, and know we're friends, they haven't any boats to come and get us." But the Skeezers didn't need boats, as the girls soon discovered. For on a sudden an opening appeared at the base of the palace, and from the opening came a slender shaft of steel, reaching out slowly but steadily across the water in the direction of the place where they stood. To the girls, this steel arrangement looked like a triangle, with the base nearest the water. It came toward them in the form of an arch, stretching out from the palace wall until its end reached the bank and rested there, while the other end still remained on the island dot. Then they saw that it was a bridge, consisting of a steel footway just broad enough to walk on, and two slender guide rails, one on either side, which were connected with the footway by steel bars. The bridge looked rather frail, and Dorothy feared it would not bear their weight, but Ozma at once called, "Come on," and started to walk across, holding fast to the rail on either side. So Dorothy summoned her courage and followed after. Before Ozma had taken 3 steps, she halted, and so forced Dorothy to halt. For the bridge was again moving and returning to the island. "We need not walk after all," said Ozma. So they stood still in their places and let the steel bridge draw them onward. Indeed, the bridge drew them well into the glass-domed building which covered the island, and soon they found themselves standing in a marble room, where 2 handsomely dressed young men stood on a platform to receive them. Ozma at once stepped from the end of the bridge to the marble platform, followed by Dorothy, and then the bridge disappeared with a slight clang of steel, and a marble slab covered the opening from which it had emerged. The 2 young men bowed profoundly to Ozma, and one of them said, "Queen Coo-ee-oh bids you welcome, O strangers. Her Majesty is waiting to receive you in her palace." "Lead on," replied Ozma with dignity. But instead of leading on, the platform of marble began to rise, carrying them upward through a square hole above which just fitted it. A moment later, they found themselves within the great glass dome that covered almost all of the island. Within this dome was a little village, with houses, streets, gardens, and parks. The houses were of colored marbles, prettily designed, with many stained glass windows, and the streets and gardens seemed well cared for. Exactly under the center of the lofty dome was a small park filled with brilliant flowers, with an elaborate fountain, and facing this park stood a building larger and more imposing than the others. Toward this building the young men escorted Ozma and Dorothy. On the streets and in the doorways or open windows of the houses were men, women, and children, all richly dressed. These were much like other people in different parts of the land of Oz, except that instead of seeming merry and contented, they all wore expressions of much solemnity or of nervous irritation. They had beautiful homes, splendid clothes, and ample food, but Dorothy at once decided something was wrong with their lives, and that they were not happy. She said nothing, however, but looked curiously at the Skeezers dot. At the entrance of the palace, Ozma and Dorothy were met by 2 other young men, in uniform and armed with queer weapons that seemed about halfway between pistols and guns, but were like neither. Their conductors bowed and left them, and the 2 in uniforms led the girls into the palace dot in a beautiful throne room. Surrounded by a dozen or more young men and women, sat the Queen of the Skeezers, Coo-ee-oh. She was a girl who looked older than Ozma or Dorothy, 15 or 16, at least, and although she was elaborately dressed as if she were going to a ball, she was too thin and plain of feature to be pretty. But evidently Queen Coo-ee-oh did not realize this fact, for her air and manner betrayed her as proud and haughty, and with a high regard for her own importance. Dorothy at once decided she was snippy, and that she would not like Queen Coo-ee-oh as a companion, Asterisk, the queen's hair was as black as her skin was white, and her eyes were black too. The eyes, as she calmly examined Ozma and Dorothy, had a suspicious and unfriendly look in them, but she said quietly, "I know who you are, for I have consulted my magic oracle, which told me that one calls herself Princess Ozma, the ruler of Var, all the land of Oz, and the other is Princess Dorothy of Oz, who came from a country called Kansas. I know nothing of the land of Oz, and I know nothing of Kansas." "Why, this is the land of Oz," cried Dorothy. "It's a part of the land of Oz, anyhow, whether you know it or not." "Oh, indeed," answered Queen Coo-ee-oh, scornfully. "I suppose you will claim next that this Princess Ozma, ruling the land of Oz, rules me." "Of course," returned Dorothy. "There's no doubt of it." The Queen turned to Ozma. "Do you dare make such a claim?" she asked. By this time Ozma had made up her mind as to the character of this haughty and disdainful creature, whose self-pride evidently led her to believe herself superior to all others. "I did not come here to quarrel with your majesty," said the girl ruler of Oz, quietly. "What and who I am is well established, and my authority comes from the fairy Queen Lurline, of whose band I was a member when Lurline made all Oz a fairyland. There are several countries and several different peoples in this broad land, each of which has its separate rulers, kings, emperors, and queens. But all these render obedience to my laws and acknowledge me as the supreme ruler. If other kings and queens are fools, that does not interest me in the least," replied Coo-ee-oh, disdainfully. "In the land of the Skeezers, I alone am supreme. You are impudent to think I would defer to you or to anyone else." "Let us not speak of this now, please," answered Ozma. "Your island is in danger, for a powerful foe is preparing to destroy it." "Pah, the Flatheads, I do not fear them. Their supreme dictator is a sorcerer. My magic is greater than his. Let the Flatheads come. They will never return to their barren mountaintop. I will see to that." Ozma did not like this attitude, for it meant that the Skeezers were eager to fight the Flatheads, and Ozma's object in coming here was to prevent fighting and induce the two quarrelsome neighbors to make peace. She was also greatly disappointed in Coo-ee-oh, for the reports of Sudik had led her to imagine the Queen more just and honorable than were the Flatheads. Indeed, Ozma reflected that the girl might be better at heart than her self-pride and overbearing manner indicated, and in any event, it would be wise not to antagonize her, but to try to win her friendship. "I do not like wars." "Your Majesty," said Ozma, "in the Emerald City, where I rule thousands of people, and in the countries near to the Emerald City, where thousands more acknowledge my rule, there is no army at all, because there is no quarreling and no need to fight. If differences arise between my people, they come to me and I judge the cases and award justice to all. So, when I learned there might be war between two faraway people of Oz, I came here to settle the dispute and adjust the quarrel." No. "One asked you to come," declared Queen Coo-ee-oh. "It is my business to settle this dispute, not yours. You say my island is a part of the land of Oz, which you rule, but that is all nonsense, for I've never heard of the land of Oz, nor of you. You say you are a fairy, and that fairies gave you command over me. I don't believe it. What I do believe is that you are an impostor, and have come here to stir up trouble among my people, who are already becoming difficult to manage. You two girls may even be spies of the vile Flatheads, for all I know, and may be trying to trick me. But understand this," she added, proudly rising from her jeweled throne to confront them. "I have magic powers greater than any fairy possesses, and greater than any Flathead possesses. I am a Krumbic witch, the only Krumbic witch in the world, and I fear the magic of no other creature that exists. You say you rule thousands. I rule 101 Skeezers, but every one of them trembles at my word. Now that Ozma of Oz and Princess Dorothy are here, I shall rule 103 subjects, for you also shall bow before my power. More than that, in ruling you, I also rule the thousands you say you rule." Dorothy was very indignant at this speech. "I've got a pink kitten that sometimes talks like that," she said, "but after I give her a good whipping, she doesn't think she's so high and mighty after all. If you only knew who Ozma is, you'd be scared to death to talk to her like that." Queen Coo-ee-oh gave the girl a supercilious look. Then she turned again to Ozma. "I happen to know," said she, "that the Flatheads intend to attack us tomorrow, but we are ready for them. Until the battle is over, I shall keep you 2 strangers prisoners on my island, from which there is no chance for you to escape." She turned and looked around the band of courtiers, who stood silently around her throne. "Lady Aurex," she continued, singling out one of the young women, "take these children to your house and care for them, giving them food and lodging. You may allow them to wander anywhere under the Great Dome, for they are harmless. After I have attended to the Flatheads, I will consider what next to do with these foolish girls." She resumed her seat, and the Lady Aurex bowed low and said in a humble manner, "I obey your Majesty's commands." Then to Ozma and Dorothy she added, "Follow me," and turned to leave the throne room. Dorothy looked to see what Ozma would do. To her surprise and a little to her disappointment, Ozma turned and followed Lady Aurex. So Dorothy trailed after them, but not without giving a parting, haughty look toward Queen Coo-ee-oh, who had her face turned the other way and did not see the disapproving look. Lady Aurex led Ozma and Dorothy along a street to a pretty marble house near to one edge of the great glass dome that covered the village. She did not speak to the girls until she had ushered them into a pleasant room, comfortably furnished. Nor did any of the solemn people they met on the street venture to speak. When they were seated, Lady Aurex asked if they were hungry, and finding they were summoned a maid and ordered food to be brought. This Lady Aurex looked to be about 20 years old, although in the land of Oz, where people have never changed in appearance since the fairies made it a fairyland, where no one grows old or dies, it is always difficult to say how many years anyone has lived. She had a pleasant, attractive face, even though it was solemn and sad, as the faces of all Skeezers seemed to be, and her costume was rich and elaborate, as became a lady in waiting upon the Queen. Ozma had observed Lady Aurex closely, and now asked her in a gentle tone, "Do you also believe me to be an impostor?" "I dare not say," replied Lady Aurex in a low tone. "Why are you afraid to speak freely?" inquired Ozma. "The Queen punishes us if we make remarks that she does not like." "Are we not alone, then, in this house?" "The Queen can hear everything that is spoken on this island, even the slightest whisper," declared Lady Aurex. "She is a wonderful witch, as she has told you, and it is folly to criticize her or disobey her commands." Ozma looked into her eyes and saw that she would like to say more if she dared. So she drew from her bosom her silver wand, and having muttered a magic phrase in a strange tongue, she left the room and walked slowly around the outside of the house, making a complete circle and waving her wand in mystic curves as she walked. Lady Aurex watched her curiously, and when Ozma had again entered the room and seated herself, she asked, "What have you done?" "I've enchanted this house in such a manner that Queen Coo-ee-oh, with all her witchcraft, cannot hear one word we speak within the magic circle I have made," replied Ozma. "We may now speak freely and as loudly as we wish, without fear of the Queen's anger." Lady Aurex brightened at this. "Can I trust you?" she asked. "Everybody trusts Ozma," exclaimed Dorothy. "She is true and honest, and your wicked queen will be sorry she insulted the powerful ruler of all the land of Oz." "The Queen does not know me yet," said Ozma, "but I want you to know me, Lady Aurex, and I want you to tell me why you and all the skeezers are unhappy. Do not fear Kuio's anger, for she cannot hear a word we say, I assure you. Lady? Oryx was thoughtful a moment. Then she said, I shall trust you, Princess Ozma. For I believe you are what you say you are, our supreme ruler. If you knew the dreadful punishments our queen inflicts upon us, you would not wonder we are so unhappy. The Skeezers are not bad people. They do not care to quarrel and fight, even with their enemies, the Flatheads. But they are so cowed and fearful of Coo-ee-oh that they obey her slightest word, rather than suffer her anger. Hasn't she any heart, then? Asked Dorothy. She never displays mercy. She loves no one but herself, asserted Lady Aurex, but she trembled as she said it, as if afraid even yet of her terrible queen. That's pretty bad, said Dorothy, shaking her head gravely. I see you've a lot to do here, Ozma, in this forsaken corner of the land of Oz. First place, you've got to take the magic away from Queen Coo-ee-oh, and from that awful Sudik, too. My idea is that neither of them is fit to rule anybody, 'cause they're cruel and hateful. So you'll have to give the Skeezers and Flatheads new rulers and teach all their people that they're part of the land of Oz and must obey. Above all, the lawful ruler Ozma of Oz. Then, when you've done that, we can go back home again. Ozma smiled at her little friend's earnest counsel, but Lady Aurex said in an anxious tone, I am surprised that you suggest these reforms while you are yet prisoners on this island and in Coo-ee-oh's power. That these things should be done, there is no doubt, but just now a dreadful war is likely to break out, and frightful things may happen to us all. Our queen has such conceit that she thinks she can overcome this Sudik and his people. But it is said Sudik's magic is very powerful, although not as great as that possessed by his wife Rora, before Coo-ee-oh transformed her into a golden pig. I don't blame her very much for doing that, remarked Dorothy, for the Flatheads were wicked to try to catch your beautiful fish, and the witch Rora wanted to poison all the fishes in the lake. Do you know the reason? Asked the Lady Aurex. I don't suppose there was any reason except just wickedness, replied Dorothy. Tell us the reason, said Ozma earnestly. Well, your Majesty, once a long time ago the Flatheads and the Skeezers were friendly. They visited our island, and we visited their mountain, and everything was pleasant between the two peoples. At that time, the Flatheads were ruled by 3 adepts in sorcery, beautiful girls who were not Flatheads, but had wandered to the Flat Mountain and made their home there. These 3 adepts used their magic only for good, and the mountain people gladly made them their rulers. They taught the Flatheads how to use their canned brains and how to work metals into clothing that would never wear out, and many other things that added to their happiness and content. Coo-ee-oh was our queen then, as now, but she knew no magic, and so had nothing to be proud of. But the 3 adepts were very kind to Coo-ee-oh. They built for us this wonderful dome of glass and our houses of marble, and taught us to make beautiful clothing and many other things. Coo-ee-oh pretended to be very grateful for these favors, but it seems that all the time she was jealous of the 3 adepts and secretly tried to discover their arts of magic. In this she was more clever than anyone suspected. She invited the 3 adepts to a banquet one day, and while they were feasting, Coo-ee-oh stole their charms and magical instruments, and transformed them to 3 fishes: a goldfish, a silverfish, and a bronzefish. While the poor fishes were gasping and flopping helplessly on the floor of the banquet room, one of them said reproachfully, You will be punished for this, Coo-ee-oh, for if one of us dies or is destroyed, you will become shriveled and helpless, and all your stolen magic will depart from you. Frightened by this threat, Coo-ee-oh at once caught up the 3 fish and ran with them to the shore of the lake, where she cast them into the water. This revived 3 adepts, and they swam away and disappeared. I, myself, witnessed this shocking scene, continued Lady Aurex, and so did many other skeezers. The news was carried to the Flatheads, who then turned from friends to enemies. The Sudik and his wife Rora were the only ones on the mountain who were glad the three adepts had been lost to them, and they at once became rulers of the Flatheads and stole their canned brains from others to make themselves the more powerful. Some of the adepts' magic tools had been left on the mountain, and these Rora seized, and by the use of them she became a witch. The result of Kuio's treachery was to make both the Skeezers and the Flatheads miserable instead of happy. Not only were the Sudik and his wife cruel to their people, but our queen at once became proud and arrogant and treated us very unkindly. All the Skeezers knew she had stolen her magic powers, and so she hated us and made us humble ourselves before her and obey her slightest word. If we disobeyed or did not please her, or if we talked about her when we were in our own homes, she would have us dragged to the whipping post in her palace and lashed with knotted cords. That is why we fear her so greatly. This story filled Ozma's heart with sorrow and Dorothy's heart with indignation. I now understand, said Ozma, why the fishes in the lake have brought about war between the Skeezers and the Flatheads. Yes, Lady Oryx answered. Now that you know the story, it is easy to understand. The Sudik and his wife came to our lake hoping to catch the silver fish, or goldfish, or bronze fish, any one of them would do, and by destroying it deprive Kuio of her magic. Then they could easily conquer her. Also they had another reason for wanting to catch the fishy. They feared that in some way the three adepts might regain their proper forms, and then they would be sure to return to the mountain and punish Rora and the Sudik. That was why Rora finally tried to poison all the fishes in the lake. At the time, Kuio transformed her into a golden pig. Of course, this attempt to destroy the fishes frightened the queen, for her safety lies in keeping the three fishes alive. I suppose Kuio will fight the Flatheads with all her might, observed Dorothy, and with all her magic, added Ozma, thoughtfully. I do not see how the Flatheads can get to this island to hurt us, said Lady Oryx. They have bows and arrows, and I guess they mean to shoot the arrows at your big dome and break all the glass in it, suggested Dorothy. But Lady Oryx shook her head with a smile. They cannot do that, she replied. Why not? I dare not tell you why, but if the Flatheads come tomorrow morning, you will yourselves see the reason. I do not think they will attempt to harm the island, Ozma declared. I believe they will first attempt to destroy the fishes, by poison or some other means. If they succeed in that, the conquest of the island will not be difficult. They have no boats, said Lady Oryx, and Kuio, who has long expected this war, has been preparing for it in many astonishing ways. I almost wish the Flatheads would conquer us, for then we would be free from our dreadful queen. But I do not wish to see the three transformed fishes destroyed, for in them lies our only hope of future happiness. Ozma will take care of you, whatever happens, Dorothy assured her. But the Lady Oryx, not knowing the extent of Ozma's power, which was, in fact, not so great as Dorothy imagined, could not take much comfort in this promise. It was evident there would be exciting times on the morrow. If the Flatheads really attacked the Skeezers of the Magic Isle. When night fell, all the interior of the great dome, streets and houses, became lighted with brilliant incandescent lamps, which rendered it bright as day. Dorothy thought the island must look beautiful by night from the outer shore of the lake. There was revelry and feasting in the Queen's palace, and the music of the royal band could be plainly heard in Lady Oryx's house, where Ozma and Dorothy remained with their hostess and keeper. They were prisoners, but treated with much consideration. Lady Oryx gave them a nice supper, and when they wished to retire, showed them to a pretty room with comfortable beds and wished them a good night and pleasant dreams. What do you think of all this, Ozma? Dorothy anxiously inquired when they were alone. I am glad we came, was the reply, for although there may be mischief done tomorrow, it was necessary. I should know about these people, whose leaders are wild and lawless and oppress their subjects with injustice and cruelties. My task, therefore, is to liberate the Skeezers and the Flatheads and secure for them freedom and happiness. I have no doubt I can accomplish this in time. Just now, though, we're in a bad fix, asserted Dorothy. If Queen Coo-ee-oh conquers tomorrow, she won't be nice to us, and if the Su-dic conquers, he'll be worse. Do not worry, dear, said Ozma. I do not think we are in danger whatever happens, and the result of our adventure is sure to be good. Dorothy was not worrying, especially. She had confidence in her friend, the Fairy Princess of Oz, and she enjoyed the excitement of the events in which she was taking part. So she crept into bed and fell asleep as easily as if she had been in her own cozy room in Ozma's palace. A sort of grating, grinding sound awakened her. The whole island seemed to tremble and sway, as it might do in an earthquake. Dorothy sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes to get the sleep out of them, and then found it was daybreak. Ozma was hurriedly dressing herself. What is it? Asked Dorothy, jumping out of bed. I'm not sure, answered Ozma, but it feels as if the island is sinking. As soon as possible they finished dressing, while the creaking and swaying continued. Then they rushed into the living room of the house and found Lady Aurex, fully dressed, awaiting them. Do not be alarmed, said their hostess. Coo-ee-oh has decided to submerge the island, that is all. But it proves the Flatheads are coming to attack us. What do you mean by submerging the island? Asked Dorothy. Come here and see, was the reply. Lady Aurex led them to a window which faced the side of the great dome which covered all the village, and they could see that the island was indeed sinking, for the water of the lake was already halfway up the side of the dome. Through the glass could be seen swimming fishes and tall stalks of swaying seaweeds, for the water was clear as crystal, and through it they could distinguish even the farther shore of the lake. The Flatheads are not here yet, said Lady Aurex. They will come soon, but not until all of this dome is under the surface of the water. Won't the dome leak? Dorothy inquired anxiously. No, indeed. Was the island ever submerged before? Oh yes, on several occasions. But Coo-ee-oh doesn't care to do that often, for it requires a lot of hard work to operate the machinery. The dome was built so that the island could disappear. I think, she continued, that our queen fears the Flatheads will attack the island and try to break the glass of the dome. Well, if we're underwater, they can't fight us, and we can't fight them, asserted Dorothy. They could kill the fishes, however, said Ozma gravely. We have ways to fight also, even though our island is underwater, claimed Lady Aurex. I cannot tell you all our secrets, but this island is full of surprises. Also, our queen's magic is astonishing. Did she steal it all from the 3 adepts in sorcery that are now fishes? She stole the knowledge and the magic tools, but she has used them as the 3 adepts never would have done. By this time the top of the dome was quite underwater, and suddenly the island stopped sinking and became stationary. See, cried Lady Aurex, pointing to the shore. The Flatheads have come. On the bank, which was now far above their heads, a crowd of dark figures could be seen. Now let us see what Coo-ee-oh will do to oppose them, continued Lady Aurex, in a voice that betrayed her excitement. The Flatheads, pushing their way through the line of palm trees, had reached the shore of the lake just as the top of the island's dome disappeared beneath the surface. The water now flowed from shore to shore, but through the clear water the dome was still visible, and the houses of the Skeezers could be dimly seen through the panes of glass. Good, exclaimed the Su-dic, who had armed all his followers, and had brought with him 2 copper vessels, which he carefully set down upon the ground beside him. If Coo-ee-oh wants to hide instead of fighting, our job will be easy, for in one of these copper vessels I have enough poison to kill every fish in the lake. Kill them, then, while we have time, and then we can go home again," advised one of the chief officers. "Not yet," objected the Sudik. "The queen of the skeezers has defied me, and I want to get her into my power, as well as to destroy her magic. She transformed my poor wife into a golden pig, and I must have revenge. For that, whatever else we do." "Look out!" suddenly exclaimed the officers, pointing into the lake. "Something's going to happen." From the submerged dome, a door opened, and something black shot swiftly out into the water. The door instantly closed behind it, and then dark object cleaved its way through the water, without rising to the surface, directly toward the place where the flatheads were standing. "What is that?" Dorothy asked the Lady Oryx. "That is one of the Queen's submarines," was the reply. "It is all enclosed, and can move underwater. Coo-ee-oh has several of these boats which are kept in little rooms in the basement under our village. When the island is submerged, the Queen uses these boats to reach the shore, and I believe she now intends to fight the flatheads with them." Asterisk the Sudik and his people knew nothing of Coo-ee-oh's submarines, so they watched with surprise as the underwater boat approached them. When it was quite near the shore, it rose to the surface, and the top parted and fell back, disclosing a boat full of armed skeezers. At the head was the Queen, standing up in the bow and holding in one hand a coil of magic rope that gleamed like silver. The boat halted, and Coo-ee-oh drew back her arm to throw the silver rope toward the Sudik, who was now but a few feet from her. But the wily flathead leader quickly realized his danger, and before the Queen could throw the rope, he caught up one of the copper vessels and dashed its contents full in her face. Asterisk Queen Coo-ee-oh dropped the rope, tottered and fell headlong into the water, sinking beneath the surface, while the skeezers in the submarine were too bewildered to assist her, and only stared at the ripples in the water where she had disappeared. A moment later, there arose to the surface a beautiful white swan. This swan was of large size, very gracefully formed, and scattered all over its white feathers were tiny diamonds, so thickly placed that as the rays of the morning sun fell upon them, the entire body of the swan glistened like one brilliant diamond. The head of the diamond swan had a bill of polished gold, and its eyes were two sparkling amethysts. "Hooray!" cried the Sudik, dancing up and down with wicked glee. "My poor wife Rora is avenged at last. You made her a golden pig, Coo-ee-oh, and now I have made you a diamond swan. Float on your lake forever, if you like, for your web feet can do. No more magic, and you are as powerless as the pig you made of my wife." "Villain! Scoundrel!" croaked the diamond swan. "You will be punished for this. Oh, what a fool I was to let you enchant me." "A fool you were, and a fool you are," laughed the Sudik, dancing madly in his delight. And then he carelessly tipped over the other copper vessel with his heel, and its contents spilled on the sands, and were lost to the last drop. The Sudik stopped short, and looked at the overturned vessel with a rueful countenance. "That's too bad, too bad," he exclaimed sorrowfully. "I've lost all the poison I had to kill the fishes with, and I can't make any more because only my wife knew the secret of it, and she is now a foolish pig and has forgotten all her magic." "Very well," said the diamond swan scornfully, as she floated upon the water and swam gracefully here and there. "I'm glad to see you are foiled. Your punishment is just beginning, for although you have enchanted me and taken away my powers of sorcery, you have still the 3 magic fishes to deal with, and they'll destroy you in time. Mark my words." The Sudik stared at the swan a moment. Then he yelled to his men, "Shoot her! Shoot the saucy bird!" They let fly some arrows at the diamond swan, but she dove under the water, and the missiles fell harmless. When Coo-ee-oh rose to the surface, she was far from the shore, and she swiftly swam across the lake to where no arrows or spears could reach her. The Sudik rubbed his chin and thought what to do next. Nearby floated the submarine in which the queen had come, but the skeezers who were in it were puzzled what to do with themselves. Perhaps they were not sorry their cruel mistress had been transformed into a diamond swan, but the transformation had left them quite helpless. The underwater boat was not operated by machinery, but by certain mystic words uttered by Q-E-O. They didn't know how to submerge it, or how to make the watertight shield cover them again, or how to make the boat go back to the castle, or make it enter the little basement room where it was usually kept. As a matter of fact, they were now shut out of their village under the great dome, and could not get back again. So one of the men called to the supreme dictator of the Flatheads, saying, "Please make us prisoners and take us to your mountain, and feed and keep us, for we have nowhere to go." Then the Sudik laughed and answered, "Not so. I can't be bothered by caring for a lot of stupid skeezers. Stay where you are, or go wherever you please, so long as you keep away from our mountain." He turned to his men and added, "We have conquered Queen Ku-E-O and made her a helpless swan. The skeezers are underwater and may stay there. So, having won the war, let us go home again and make merry and feast, having after many years proved the Flatheads to be greater and more powerful than the skeezers." So the Flatheads marched away and passed through the row of palms and went back to their mountain, where the Sudik and a few of his officers feasted, and all the others were forced to wait on them. "I'm sorry we couldn't have roast pig," said the Sudik, "but as the only pig we have is made of gold, we can't eat her. Also the golden pig happens to be my wife, and even were she not gold, I am sure she would be too tough to eat." Asterisk. When the Flatheads had gone away the diamond swan swam back to the boat, and one of the young skeezers named Ervik said to her eagerly, "How can we get back to the island, Your Majesty?" "Am I not beautiful?" asked Ku-E-O, arching her neck gracefully and spreading her diamond-sprinkled wings. "I can see my reflection in the water, and I'm sure there is no bird nor beast, nor human as magnificent as I am. How shall we get back to the island, Your Majesty?" pleaded Ervik. "When my fame spreads throughout the land, people will travel from all parts of this lake to look upon my loveliness," said Ku-E-O, shaking her feathers to make the diamonds glitter more brilliantly. "But, Your Majesty, we must go home, and we do not know how to get there," Ervik persisted. "My eyes," remarked the diamond swan, "are wonderfully blue and bright, and will charm all beholders. Tell us how to make the boat go, how to get back into the island," begged Ervik, and the others cried just as earnestly, "Tell us, Q-E-O. Tell us." "I don't know," replied the queen in a careless tone. "You are a magic worker, a sorceress, a witch." "I was, of course, when I was a girl," she said, bending her head over the clear water to catch her reflection in it. "But now I've forgotten all such foolish things as magic. Swans are lovelier than girls, especially when they're sprinkled with diamonds. Don't you think so?" And she gracefully swam away, without seeming to care whether they answered or not. Asterisk. Ervik and his companions were in despair. They saw plainly that Ku-E-O could not, or would not help them. The former queen had no further thought for her island, her people, or her wonderful magic. She was only intent on admiring her own beauty. "Truly," said Ervik in a gloomy voice, "the Flatheads have conquered us." Some of these events had been witnessed by Ozma and Dorothy, and Lady Aurex, who had left the house and gone close to the glass of the dome in order to see what was going on. Many of the skeezers had also crowded against the dome, wondering what would happen next, although their vision was to an extent blurred by the water and the necessity of looking upward. At an angle, they had observed the main points of the drama enacted above. They saw Queen Ku-E-O's submarine come to the surface and open. They saw the queen standing erect to throw her magic rope. They saw her sudden transformation into a diamond swan. and a cry of amazement went up from the skeezers inside the dome. "Good," exclaimed Dorothy. "I hate that old Sudik, but I'm glad Coo-ee-oh is punished." "This is a dreadful misfortune," cried Lady Aurex, pressing her hands upon her heart. "Yes," agreed Ozma, nodding her head thoughtfully. "Coo-ee-oh's misfortune will prove a terrible blow to her people." "What do you mean by that?" asked Dorothy in surprise. "Seems to me the skeezers are in luck to lose their cruel queen." "If that were all, you would be right," responded Lady Aurex. "And if the island were above water, it would not be so serious. But here we all are, at the bottom of the lake, and fast prisoners in this dome. Can't you raise the island?" inquired Dorothy. "No, only Coo-ee-oh knew how to do that," was the answer. "We can try," insisted Dorothy. "If it can be made to go down, it can be made to come up. The machinery is still here, I suppose." "Yes, but the machinery works by magic, and Coo-ee-oh would never share her secret power with any one of us." Dorothy's face grew grave. "But she was thinking, Ozma knows a lot of magic," she said. "But not that kind of magic," Ozma replied. "Can't you learn how by looking at the machinery?" "I'm afraid not, my dear. It isn't fairy magic at all. It is witchcraft." "Well," said Dorothy, turning to Lady Aurex, "you say there are other sub-sinking boats. We can get in one of those and shoot out to the top of the water, like Coo-ee-oh did, and so escape. And then we can help to rescue all the skeezers down here." "No one knows how to work the underwater boats but the Queen," declared Lady Aurex. "Isn't there any door or window in this dome that we could open?" "No, and if there were, the water would rush in to flood the dome, and we could not get out." "The skeezers," said Ozma, "could not drown. They only get wet and soggy, and in that condition they would be very uncomfortable and unhappy. But you are a mortal girl, Dorothy, and if your magic belt protected you from death, you would have to lie forever at the bottom of the lake." "No, I'd rather die quickly," asserted the little girl. "But there are doors in the basement that open to let out the bridges and the boats, and that would not flood the dome. You know, those doors open by a magic word, and only." "Coo-ee-oh knows the word that must be uttered," said Lady Aurex. "Dear me," exclaimed Dorothy, "that dreadful queen's witchcraft upsets all my plans to escape. I guess I'll give it up, Ozma, and let you save us." Ozma smiled, but her smile was not so cheerful as usual. The Princess of Oz found herself confronted with a serious problem, and although she had no thought of despairing, she realized that the skeezers and their island, as well as Dorothy and herself, were in grave trouble, and that, unless she could find a means to save them, they would be lost to the land of Oz for all future time. "In such a dilemma," said she, musingly, "nothing is gained by haste. Careful thought may aid us, and so may the course of events. The unexpected is always likely to happen, and cheerful patience is better than reckless action." "All right," returned Dorothy. "Take your time, Ozma. There's no hurry. How about some breakfast, Lady Aurex?" Their hostess led them back to the house, where she ordered her trembling servants to prepare and serve breakfast. All the skeezers were frightened and anxious over the transformation of their queen into a swan. Coo-ee-oh was feared and hated, but they had depended on her magic to conquer the Flatheads, and she was the only one who could raise their island to the surface of the lake again. Before breakfast was over, several of the leading skeezers came to Aurex to ask her advice and to question Princess Ozma, of whom they knew nothing except that she claimed to be a fairy and the ruler of all the land, including the Lake of the Skeezers. If what you told Queen Coo-ee-oh was the truth, they said to her, "You are our lawful mistress, and we may depend on you to get us out of our difficulties." "I will try to do that," Ozma graciously assured them. "But you must remember that the powers of fairies are granted them to bring comfort and happiness to all who appeal to them. On the contrary, Such magic as Kuio knew and practiced is unlawful witchcraft, and her arts are such as no fairy would condescend to use. However, it is sometimes necessary to consider evil in order to accomplish good, and perhaps by studying Kuio's tools and charms of witchcraft, I may be able to save us. Do you promise to accept me as your ruler and to obey my commands?" They promised willingly. "Then," continued Ozma, "I will go to Kuio's palace and take possession of it. Perhaps what I find there will be of use to me. In the meantime, tell all the skeezers to fear nothing, but have patience. Let them return to their homes and perform their daily tasks as usual. Kuio's loss may not prove a misfortune, but rather a blessing." This speech cheered the skeezers amazingly. Really, they had no one now to depend upon but Ozma, and in spite of their dangerous position, their hearts were lightened by the transformation and absence of their cruel queen. They got out their brass band, and a grand procession escorted Ozma and Dorothy to the palace, where all of Kuio's former servants were eager to wait upon them. Ozma invited Lady Oryx to stay at the palace also, for she knew all about the skeezers and their island, and had also been a favorite of the former queen, so her advice and information were sure to prove valuable.